Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel going after Hamas again and preparing for its military move into the last Hamas stronghold in Rafah to wipe out its remaining military forces, despite opposition from the Biden administration. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pushing back on US Senator Chuck Schumer's criticism of him last week. How Israel is responding to a drop in support for the Jewish state among young Christians here in the United States. We're going to take a look at why that support is falling. Americans fleeing from the chaos and violence in Haiti by plane. We're going to bring you a dramatic escape story from the embattled island nation. Plus, the U.S. and South Korea wrapping up military exercises against the threat of a nuclear North Korea. We're going to hear why some believe prayer and the gospel are also important tools to take a stand. All those stories and more ahead today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Lots to get to this half hour. We begin in Israel, where the Israeli Defense Forces launched a major raid in Gaza today. And as Israel is moving ahead with its plans to go into the last Hamas stronghold of Rafah, despite opposition from the Biden administration and other world leaders. All this as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing back on comments from Senator Chuck Schumer, calling for new elections to replace him. Chris Mitchell brings us the story now from Jerusalem.
Monday, Israeli forces carried out a raid on al-Shifa hospital, Gaza's largest medical center, because they said it had intelligence that senior Hamas militants were in the complex and arrested 80 people. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu is pushing back against U.S. pressure for new leadership. On Sunday, Netanyahu went on multiple U.S. networks to respond to Senator Chuck Schumer and the White House.
I think Schumer's statements are wholly inappropriate. I think we're not a banana republic. The people of Israel will choose when they'll have elections, who they elect, and it's not something that will be foisted upon us. That, it's wrong to try to replace the elected leaders of a sister democracy and a staunch American ally at any time, but especially during the time of war.
Even before Schumer's speech last week, Israel's Channel 14 released a poll showing ongoing U.S. hostility has strengthened Netanyahu over his nearest political rival, Benny Gantz. The Jerusalem Post also reporting that a majority of Israelis support Netanyahu's day-after plan for the Gaza Strip when the war with Hamas is over. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met with Netanyahu on Sunday. He said Germany stands with Israel, but like many nations, questions Israel's military operation in Rafah.
The longer the war lasts, the higher the number of civilian casualties rises, the more desperate the situation of the people in Gaza become, the more this begs the question, no matter how important the goal, can it justify such terribly high costs? Or are there other ways to achieve your goal?
On Friday, Israel's security cabinet agreed to a plan to enter Rafah. Egypt and the European Union object to that plan, and National Security Advisor John Kirby says the White House expects assurances of how Israel will take care of Gazans.
Now the Israelis will tell you they've got a plan for that, the evacuation. They call it humanitarian islands, and we welcome any credible plan to take care of them, but we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it yet.
The U.S. and other nations are calling for more humanitarian aid. CBN News witnessed the transfer of that aid by the IDF at the Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza. Colonel Elad Goren of the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, or COGOT, says the problem is the UN is failing to distribute the aid once inside Gaza.
Just keep saying more, and it doesn't matter if we will pass 1,000 trucks here and they won't able to collect it, they will say that there is a humanitarian crisis. From our understanding, there is no humanitarian crisis. There are challenges, there are obstacles, and the main gap is the capacity of the UN agencies to deliver and to take responsibility over their own operation.
Our CBN News and Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joining us now from Jerusalem with more. So, Chris, there are reports the U.S. believes it will take weeks for Israel to put humanitarian preparations in place to evacuate Gazans from Rafah. Will Israel wait that long, and would this will this lead to help? Will this wait time actually help Hamas?
Well, Ephraim, I think it's going to indeed help Hamas. They're in Rafah. They'll be able to hide more of their senior leaders, hide the hostages. Many people believe many of those hostages are inside Rafah. So far, Israel's not gone into Rafah, but these humanitarian islands they're talking about, some say here in Israel, they're not to the north, but to the west. And we have heard before of these safe zones being next to the Mediterranean Sea, humanitarian islands that would be created along with the international communities. They would give temporary housing, food, and water. And really, these are unprecedented efforts to protect the civilians in Gaza. Now, right on the other side of this, Egypt and the EU, they're opposing any military action into Gaza. The U.S. is saying they'll support targeted raids into Rafah right now. But Netanyahu is adamant, and he's been saying this over and over again for the last several weeks, that if Israel can't defeat Hamas in Rafah, then it loses the war, and it would help Hamas survive, something that Israel and Israelis really can't tolerate.
What more can you tell us about the Israeli raid on Shifa Hospital in Gaza today?
Well, Ephraim, earlier today was about 2:30 in the morning. They raided the hospital after it says they had concrete evidence that Hamas terrorists were inside the hospital. They were using it as a command and control center. Hamas was opening fire on soldiers. One Israeli soldier was killed in this raid. The IDF gave many of the civilians in the hospital a map of safe places to go to. Now, al-Shifa is actually well known in this war. It had been used by Hamas before. There was a network of underground tunnels underneath that complex. And there's video of hostages being brought into that hospital after October 7th. And all this is part of Hamas's strategy to use hospitals, mosques, schools, all in its war effort against Israel. And that explains some of the reason why the IDF went in this morning to raid the hospital, because of Hamas terrorists using it once more as a safe haven.
Chris, Netanyahu is pushing back against Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer's remarks calling for new elections in Israel. And so are many Republicans here in the United States. What do you think the longer-term impact of Schumer's statements will be?
Well, actually, short term, and as we said in our report, it seems to be strengthening Netanyahu politically, if you believe these reports that said, one of these reports said that now Israelis support Netanyahu 47% as opposed to 37% against Benny Gantz, probably his main political rival. So at least in the short term, it's helping him. But it really just wasn't Senator Schumer, Ephraim. It was the president saying after the State of the Union address, he had said Bibi and him need to have a come to Jesus moment. Before that, the U.S. intelligence had said that Israelis want to overthrow Netanyahu. Now, if you're here on the ground here in Israel, that's simply not true. And so long term, there's a fraying of the U.S.-Israel relationship. On the 700 Club on Friday, we had former U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, say last Thursday when Senator Schumer made those remarks, it was a historically dark day in U.S.-Israel relations. So I think Israel right now, for one, is thinking long term, maybe not depending on the U.S. diplomatically or militarily. And militarily, in a sense, they want to make sure they're independent of U.S. military aid, setting up their own military infrastructure, because they know now that the U.S., if they don't agree with Israel's war aims, they could slow down or stop the munitions which are essential to Israel's war goals.
Israel is saying it destroyed all or part of one of the longest terror tunnels it has discovered yet. What do we know about that?
Well, it connected northern and southern Gaza. It was more than 1.5 miles long, part of the nearly 500 miles of tunnels in Gaza. A few weeks ago, Ephraim, we were inside one of those tunnels. When you see the construction, there were billions of dollars that had gone into that infrastructure, a tunnel system longer than the London subway, and unprecedented challenges to the fighting of IDF soldiers. They had urban warfare and tunnel warfare at the same time. I talked to a special forces person who's very experienced in this warfare, and he said it's really like three-dimensional fighting. So it's very much of a challenge to the IDF fighting there inside Gaza.
Israel's defense minister says Hamas is trying to hide the death of their number 3 man reportedly killed in an Israeli airstrike. Was this a key victory for Israel? What can you tell us about it?
It could be, Ephraim, if it's true. His name was Marwan Issa. He was targeted last week by the IDF, known as the Shadow Man, one of the masterminds of October 7th. And the IDF chief of staff says Hamas is hiding whether or not he was killed. One report says that Hamas officials went silent for 72 hours on their phones, and it's a sign of maybe human intelligence inside some of these senior Hamas leaders. And the IDF chief of staff making the point, this is a highly sensitive, complex operation, and they were able to perhaps pull it off.
All right, Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem, thank you as always for your insight. Stay safe and know that many people back here at home are praying for you and our entire staff there in Israel. Evangelical Christians here in the U.S. have a long history as strong supporters of Israel, but new research shows that support is plummeting among younger evangelicals. Paul Strand has a reaction to that development from Jerusalem.
As recently as 5 years ago, 2/3 of young American evangelicals fully supported Israel, while only 5% backed the Palestinian cause. The latest polling shows, though, since then, that support for Israel has plunged to just 1/3, while support for Palestinians is up to 25%. We asked Jerusalem Post commentator Professor Gil Troy what he makes of this startling drop-off in support for the Jewish nation.
So is this poll a warning sign? Absolutely. But is this a time to panic? Absolutely not.
Gil Troy points out a vast majority of Americans, including evangelicals, still back the Jewish nation.
80% of Americans are supporting Israel. God bless the evangelical community, because we've seen for decades how stalwart the evangelical Christians have been, and we really feel a brotherhood and are very, very grateful.
Part of the change in young evangelical support comes because they have moved away from pro-Israeli media and toward mainstream and social media that Troy warns persistently portray Israel as an oppressor and an aggressor nation.
Beware of poison sources, of TikTok, of social media, of reducing a very complicated conflict, which has its dimensions, to a soundbite or to a tweet. We now call it an X. Go and learn. Plunge into the conflict. I am confident that we have truth on our side.
What do youth consistently hear from anti-Israel sources?
It's Israel the bully against the small Palestinians, when of course the Palestinians are part of a broader Arab world, part of an Iranian axis, which has billions, which targets little Israel.
Troy says if young people will take the time to research unbiased, balanced sources, they'll find that many Hamas and Palestinian supporters back genocide against the Jewish people and wiping Israel off the map, and more.
When our young people take a plunge in and see the truth and get beyond some of the propagandizing of some of these oversimplified professors and these influencers on TikTok, they'll see that this is a civilizational battle. Israel, the Jewish people, Zionists, Americans, liberals, conservatives, it doesn't matter who, we're all together defending freedom and defending equality. That's who we are. That's our fight today.
Israel may well become much less of an American priority, and that could mean this strong U.S. ally and the Middle East's only democracy might receive much less American military aid. Troy, though, shares a more optimistic view of the future.
If you look at polling over the last 30, 40 years, the older you get, the more pro-Israel you are. You tend to grow into that. And the more you distance yourself from some of the propagandizing that's going on college campuses, the more pro-Israel and pro-America you are. And that's the two strands of the DNA, pro-Israel, pro-America together. And once our young people understand that, once our young people see how our fates are intertwined, it's not only that we have a common enemy, but we also have a shared fate and shared values and a shared future.
Only time will tell which view comes true. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, Americans are fleeing from the violence in Haiti, finally with a way out by plane. We're going to bring you a look at the chaos there, including a remarkable story of an escape when we come back.
Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
The first charter flight with U.S. citizens fleeing from the chaos in Haiti landed in Miami Sunday, but many more are still trapped and trying to get out. Dale Hurd is on this story.
State Department officials say more than 30 U.S. citizens were on a government-chartered flight that touched down in Florida. It's also working to arrange more flights to get stranded Americans out of Haiti. Among those trying to escape the spiraling gang violence gripping Haiti is Francis St. Tellis, a Haitian-American from New Hampshire. He's been trapped in Haiti for a month and has already had 2 flights home canceled. His son, who lives in Virginia, is doing all he can.
I've been praying. I've been seeking guidance from people I trust, reaching out to the government, reaching out to my family and friends to get the word out about what is happening.
As powerful gangs continue to topple the sitting government, the capital, Port-au-Prince, has become a war zone, completely cut off from the outside world.
The situation is not really calm in Port-au-Prince because, like I said before, there was many attacks from the gang in Port-au-Prince. 80% of the capital is under influence of the gang.
Famine is also a concern. The World Food Program says nearly 1 million people are at risk. Hundreds of Americans are trapped. Among the Americans trapped in Haiti was best-selling author Mitch Albom, who spoke with CBN News' Billy Hollowell. Albom and his wife Janine run an orphanage in Haiti. They were on their monthly visit when Haiti's government collapsed. Trying desperately to get himself, his wife, and 8 American volunteers out of the country, Albom said he could get no help from the U.S. government.
We basically got stonewalled and just told, well, there's nothing we can do, just shelter in place. Are you taking bullets? And I said, well, if we're taking bullets, why are you telling us to shelter in place?
The group was finally rescued last week in the dead of night by helicopter in a mission coordinated by Michigan Congresswoman Lisa McClain and Florida Congressman Corey Mills.
And we ran outside and flashed the lights so that they could see where we were. And just like in one of those movies, you see a light coming out of the sky, you hear ba 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 ba, and next thing you know, there's a thing on the ground. Guy jumps out, I think it was Corey Mills, and said, let's go, let's go, let's go. And everybody runs in. And then, of course, that's when you hold your breath because you don't want anybody shooting at you from the ground.
Albom said his chief concern now is for the 100 children and staff he had to leave behind.
When we do our nightly devotions, you can hear all the gunfire in the background. It's such a juxtaposition. It doesn't make sense. They're singing these beautiful songs to God about being grateful for what they have. There's that song, you've given me love and a fine family. Thank you, Lord, for your blessings on me. And you can hear while they're singing that, out in the street. I mean, like rapid fire, machine gun kind of fire. And, it's a shame that they have to live with this.
While the U.S. and Caribbean nations seek to establish an interim government, Haiti's former foreign minister warns the country risks becoming a big open-air jail run by gangs who will fight international attempts to end the violence. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead, how U.S. and South Korean military forces are working together against the nuclear threat from North Korea. We're going to hear why some say it could bring peace to the Korean Peninsula and the importance of prayer and spreading the gospel. That story's coming up right after this. A military exercise between South Korea and U.S. troops expanded this year, wrapping up late last week. The two allies have doubled this year's drills to bolster security and elevate combat readiness in response to North Korea's increasing nuclear threat. CBN's Lucille Toulousan brings us that story from Seoul, South Korea.
Freedom Shield, the joint military exercise, included air assault, live fire, and bombing drills to show North Korea the two allies' strengths and unity. In January, Kim Jong-un test-fired cruise missiles and a ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan. He also abandoned any reunification effort due to South Korea's relationship with the U.S. While some believe Freedom Shield may increase tension, Chung-Lin Lee of South Korea's Ministry of Defense believes it's key to maintaining peace in the peninsula.
In 5,000 years of Korean history, South Korea is in war every 20 years. But now, Korea has not been in war for 70 years. And I believe this is the result of strong joint military exercise between South Korea and the US.
North Korea's strengthened ties with Russia and its growing nuclear threat have made the Korean peninsula a more dangerous place. However, Christian ministries like Peace Korea are pursuing spiritual solutions to calm the tensions. Retired military serviceman and Peace Korea founder Dr. Moon Young-ho says the South Korea people should also take action to seek peace. He believes prayer and intentionally spreading the gospel to North Korean defectors to share with their families could open a new path to reunification.
Our Lord wants us to evangelize North Korea. We should pray for that, and we should work for that together. Then we could see the Lord's work in the future.
Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Seoul.
Coming back with an encouraging word for your day ahead. Stay with us. It's coming up right after this.
The CBN News app. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Watch CBN News Channel Live. CBN News. Because truth matters. Get the CBN News app today.
Welcome back. Time now for your Monday Motivation. I leave you with this thought as we begin another week together. God is good even when your circumstances aren't. And His goodness will work everything together for your good. Trust, hold fast to hope, and put feet to your faith. With that word, make this a marvelous Monday and be sure to have yourself a wonderful rest of the week. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online at cbnnews.com. Take a moment. Let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.